The bill was for $1,143. The quote was for zero. The signature line was blank. And the actual vendor my HOA claimed had done the work, sent me an email that said they had no record of replacing anything in my unit. That was the moment I stopped being annoyed and became interested. There is a difference. Annoyed people argue. Interested people ask for documents. I was sitting at my kitchen table with 4 pieces of paper lined up in front of me. On the left was the original email from my HOA manager saying their approved vendor would come out to inspect a small leak near my fire sprinkler head at no charge. In the middle was the bill they had added to my owner account 3 weeks later. On the right was a work order with a blank signature line and a description that did not match what happened in my apartment. And in my inbox, sitting there like a loaded tool, was the vendor's reply. Inspection only. No replacement record found. My HOA had made a mistake that a lot of little private governments make. They thought the power was in the letterhead. It was not. The power was in the records behind it. I lived in a mid-rise condo building outside Raleigh. Not luxury, not cheap, one of those older buildings where every hallway smelled faintly like floor cleaner and every board meeting had at least one person asking why landscaping cost so much. I bought my unit after my divorce because it was small, quiet, and close enough to my office that I could get home before dark in winter. The building had a homeowners association, of course. Technically it was a condominium association, but everyone called it the HOA because that was faster and made people sound equally tired. The association handled common elements, exterior maintenance, hallways, elevators, the roof, and building-wide systems like fire alarms and sprinkler lines. Owners handled the inside of their units unless a problem came from a shared system. That distinction mattered. It mattered more than anyone on the board wanted it to. I am not a contractor. I am not a lawyer. I work in medical billing compliance, which means I spend my days looking at codes, authorizations, payment denials, and the little boxes people skip because they assume nobody will ever check them. My job made me boring in a very useful way. If someone tells me I owe money, I do not start by asking how they feel about it. I ask for the record. For the first year I lived there, I mostly stayed out of HOA business. I paid my dues. I read the meeting minutes when they were sent. I voted in board elections if I had enough information. I did not join the Facebook group because I value my blood pressure. Then one Tuesday morning in April, I noticed a tiny brownish ring forming on the ceiling around the sprinkler head in my hallway. It was not dramatic. No water running down the wall. No emergency. Just a stain the size of a quarter and a faint shine around the metal plate. I took 3 photos with my phone because that is what you do when you own property and something above your head looks expensive. Then I emailed the HOA manager. Her name was Denise. She worked for the property management company our board had hired 2 years earlier. Denise was polite in the way people are polite when they want you to stop emailing them. Every reply from her sounded like it had been approved by a committee of beige walls. I wrote, "Hi Denise, I noticed staining around the fire sprinkler head in my hallway. Since the sprinkler system appears to be part of the building fire system, can you confirm whether the association needs to inspect this before I contact anyone myself?" Photos attached. I attached the photos. I did not use exclamation points. I did not accuse anyone. I just asked the right question. Denise replied that afternoon. Please do not contact outside contractors for fire sprinkler issues. The association uses approved vendors for building fire systems. We will send Evergreen Fire Protection to inspect. There is no charge for the initial inspection. If the issue is determined to be owner responsibility, you will be notified before any billable work is performed. That email became the hinge of the whole story. No charge for the initial inspection. Notified before billable work. I saved it in a folder called HOA Sprinkler. 2 days later, Evergreen called me to schedule. The woman on the phone said they had a technician in my area Friday morning. I asked, "Is this just an inspection?" She said, "That is what the work order says. Inspection only. If he finds something that needs replacement, the office would have to price it out." I said, "Can you send that appointment confirmation by email?" She paused for half a second. Not annoyed, just surprised. Then she said, "Sure." 10 minutes later, I had the confirmation. Service type, inspection. Quoted amount, $0. I saved that too. The technician arrived at 9:12 on Friday. His name was Carl. He was maybe in his late 50s, very calm, the kind of tradesman who carries a flashlight like it is part of his hand. I walked him to the hallway and showed him the stain. He looked up for about 10 seconds and said, "That is old moisture or a slow weep. I am going to check the collar and the plate, but I am not opening the head." I said, "Do you need me to sign anything?" He said, "Not for an inspection. If we do work, yes." That mattered too. He took pictures, checked the surrounding ceiling with a moisture meter, removed the decorative plate, looked at the pipe entry, and put the plate back. He was in my unit for 31 minutes. I know that because my doorbell camera records motion and my building access app logs when guests enter and leave through the lobby call box. Again, I am boring in a useful way. Before he left, Carl said, "I do not see an active leak. It may have been condensation or an old stain. I will tell them to monitor it. If it gets bigger, call again." I asked, "So nothing was replaced?" He looked mildly offended, like I had asked if he had secretly rebuilt my ceiling while I blinked. No. I did not replace anything. He did not hand me an invoice. He did not ask for a credit card. He did not ask me to sign a work authorization. He did not leave parts, remove parts, or cut drywall. He just left. I emailed Denise that afternoon. Evergreen inspected the sprinkler area this morning. The technician said he did not find an active leak and did not perform any replacement. Please let me know if the association needs anything else from me. Denise replied Monday. Thank you. We will keep the report on file. That should have been the end. It was not. 3 weeks later, I opened my owner portal to pay the monthly dues and saw a balance that made no sense. Current charges, $1,143. Description, unit chargeback, emergency sprinkler repair. I stared at it for a few seconds because my first thought was that I had opened the wrong account. Then I clicked the charge detail. The PDF attached to my account said Evergreen Fire Protection had replaced a ruptured sprinkler head in my unit. It listed labor, materials, emergency dispatch, administrative processing, and a management fee. At the bottom, under owner approval, there was a blank line. No signature. No initials. No date. There was also a line that said, "Owner present and authorized repair." That was the first sentence that made me put my coffee down. I had been present. I had not authorized a repair. No repair had happened. I emailed Denise. I am disputing the $1,143 chargeback added to my account. The original appointment confirmation stated the visit was a $0 inspection. No repair was performed in my unit, and I did not authorize any billable work. Please provide the signed work authorization, the itemized vendor invoice, the technician report, photos of the replaced part, and any association policy you are relying on to charge this to my account. I kept the tone boring. That is important. When people are wrong and they know they are wrong, they often need you to sound emotional so they can make the argument about your attitude. I did not give Denise that gift. She replied the next morning. The charge is valid. Per association policy, owners are responsible for repairs originating from their units. Please pay the balance to avoid late fees. That was not an answer. It was a conclusion wearing a policy costume. I replied, "Thank you. I am not asking whether owners can be responsible for unit-originated repairs. I am asking for the records showing this repair occurred, that it originated from my unit, and that I authorized billable work. Please send the signed authorization, itemized vendor invoice, technician report, and photos." No reply for 2 days. Then I got a letter in the portal. It said my account would be considered delinquent if the charge was not paid within 15 days. That was when the story changed shape. Up to that point, it was a billing dispute. Annoying, but ordinary. After the delinquency notice, it became a paper trail problem. They had taken an unsupported charge and attached consequences to it. Late fees. Collection language. The possibility of legal fees if an HOA account was allowed to spiral. A lot of owners pay at that point, not because they agree, but because they are scared of the machine. I understood that. I also understood something else. Machines need inputs. So I started looking at theirs. First, I called Evergreen Fire Protection. I did not call the technician. I called the main office and asked for billing. I said, "I am trying to match an invoice to a chargeback my HOA placed on my account. Can you confirm whether invoice or work order number 77491 involved a replacement in my unit?" The billing clerk, a woman named Martina, asked for the service address and unit number. I gave it to her. I heard typing. Then she said, "I see an inspection visit. I do not see a replacement." I asked her to repeat that because I wanted the exact words in my notes. She said, "The work order says inspection only. No parts billed. No sprinkler head replacement." I said, "Would you be able to send me a copy of that?" She said, "I can send the customer copy to the authorized account contact, which is the property manager." Of course. I asked, "Can you at least email me confirming that your records do not show a replacement for my unit on that date?" She paused. That was the pause where someone decides whether being helpful will create extra work. Then she said, "I can confirm what our system shows. I cannot comment on your HOA billing." I said, "That is all I need." 20 minutes later, Martina emailed me. Per your request, Evergreen Fire Protection records for the service visit at your unit on April 19 show inspection only. Our records do not show replacement of a sprinkler head or billable repair performed inside the unit on that date. I read it 3 times. Then I printed it. That email was the first clean cut. I sent it to Denise. Evergreen has confirmed their records show inspection only and no sprinkler head replacement. Please remove the $1,143 chargeback or provide the records supporting it. Denise replied faster than usual. The association's work order reflects a repair. Vendor records may not include the association's administrative charges. The balance remains due. That was a strange answer. Administrative charges do not create a ruptured sprinkler head. Administrative charges do not fill in a blank signature line. Administrative charges do not turn inspection only into replacement. So I asked the next question. Please provide the association's original work order, the board approval for the chargeback, and the policy allowing an owner chargeback without signed authorization or vendor invoice support. This time, Denise did not reply. Instead, I got a message from the board treasurer. His name was Alan. Alan had the tone of a man who believed spreadsheets made him a judge. He wrote, "The board will not debate vendor charges by email. The owner is responsible for maintenance related to her unit. Continued refusal to pay may result in late fees." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because he had just put the word refusal in writing before producing a single record. I wrote back, "Alan, I am not refusing to pay a valid charge. I am disputing a charge the vendor says is not supported by their records. Please provide the documentation requested or schedule a hearing under the association's dispute procedure. Then I attached Denise's original email, the $0 quote, the blank work order, the portal charge, and Martina's email from Evergreen. I copied the board president. That got attention. The board president was a woman named Ruth. I had met her once in the elevator. She was not warm, exactly, but she seemed practical. The next morning, Ruth replied, "The board will review this at the next executive session. In the meantime, late fees will be held." That sentence told me two things. First, someone on the board had finally looked at the attachments. Second, they were not confident enough to keep adding penalties. That did not mean the charge was gone. It meant the machine had slowed down. When you are fighting a paper trail problem, slowing the machine is the first win. I spent the next weekend building a timeline. Not a rant. Not a manifesto. A timeline. April 16, 8:42 a.m. Photos taken of ceiling stain. April 16, 9:11 a.m. Email sent to HOA asking whether association should inspect shared sprinkler system. April 16, 2:38 p.m. Denise replies that association vendor will inspect at no charge and owner will be notified before billable work. April 18, 10:04 a.m. Evergreen appointment confirmation says service type inspection, quoted amount $0. April 19, 9:12 a.m. Technician enters building. April 19, 9:43 a.m. Technician exits building. April 19, 1:27 p.m. I email HOA confirming no repair was performed. April 22, 10:09 a.m. Denise says report will be kept on file. May 10, $1,143 chargeback appears. May 11, dispute sent. May 14, vendor confirms inspection only, no replacement record. I added the documents behind each line. Then I read the condo declaration. That was not fun. Nobody reads condo declarations because they want to. They read them because someone has made being bored cheaper than being robbed. The declaration said owners were responsible for damage originating from their units and for repairs to components serving only their units. The association was responsible for common elements and building systems unless owner negligence caused the damage. Chargebacks required documentation of the expense and notice to the owner. Documentation of the expense. Notice to the owner. I highlighted those words. Then I read the rules for hearings. Owners could dispute charges and request a board hearing. The board had to provide the basis for the charge and allow the owner to submit evidence. I highlighted that too. Then I sent the most boring email of my life. Ruth, Denise, and board, I am requesting a hearing regarding the $1,143 sprinkler chargeback. I am also requesting, prior to the hearing, the documentation supporting the charge, including the original vendor invoice, the signed authorization, the technician report, any photos, the board action approving the chargeback, and the association policy supporting owner responsibility for a vendor service that the vendor records as inspection only. It was not dramatic. It worked. Ruth scheduled the hearing for the following Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Denise sent me a packet 2 days before the meeting. The packet was thin. That is not a metaphor. It was 11 pages, and 6 of them were copies of emails I had sent. The actual support for the charge was 1 internal HOA work order and 1 ledger entry. The work order said, emergency repair, ruptured sprinkler head, unit 412, bill owner. It did not have a technician name. It did not have a material list. It did not have a signed authorization. It did not have photos. It did not have an invoice from Evergreen. The ledger entry showed the charge entered manually by Denise. That was it. No vendor invoice. No proof of replacement. No record that the board had approved the chargeback before it was placed on my account. Just an internal sentence and a number. I remember sitting there, looking at the PDF, and feeling the whole argument settle into place. They did not have a bill. They had typed one. The hearing was held in the community room on the first floor. It had folding tables, stackable chairs, and a bulletin board with outdated pool rules. Ruth sat at the center of the table. Alan sat to her right with a laptop. Denise attended on speakerphone. 2 other board members were there, both looking like they regretted volunteering for democracy. I brought a folder with tabs. I know how that sounds. I also know how effective tabs are when someone else brings vibes. Ruth started by saying, "This is a hearing regarding the disputed sprinkler chargeback for Unit 412. We are not here to argue about personalities. We are here to determine whether the charge is supported." I liked Ruth a little for that. Alan opened with, "The association has a responsibility to maintain the building and recover costs from owners when repairs relate to their units. If we let owners dispute every charge, the association cannot function." That was a speech. It did not answer the question. Ruth looked at me. "You can present your dispute." I said, "I am not disputing the association's right to recover valid costs. I am disputing whether this cost exists as described." Then I handed out the timeline. I did not start with feelings. I started with Denise's email. "This is the association's instruction that I should not contact an outside contractor and that the approved vendor would perform an initial inspection at no charge. It also says I would be notified before billable work was performed." Ruth read it. One of the other board members leaned over to see. I continued. "This is Evergreen's appointment confirmation. Service type, inspection. Quoted amount, $0. Alan said, "Initial quotes can change once a technician is on site." I said, "I agree. That is why the next document matters." I slid over the blank work order. "This is the association's work order packet. There is no owner signature. There is no authorization for billable work. There is no technician report attached. There are no photos attached." Denise's voice came through the speakerphone. "The technician was in the unit. The owner was present." I said, "Correct. For 31 minutes. For an inspection." Then I slid over the door log. That was the moment Alan looked up. He had not expected a door log. I said, "The technician entered at 9:12 and exited at 9:43. He did not open the ceiling, replace a head, or ask me to sign anything." I emailed Denise that same afternoon confirming no repair was performed. Denise replied that the report would be kept on file. Ruth looked at Denise's printed reply. "Denise," she said, "where is the report?" There was a pause on the speakerphone. Denise said, "The report is summarized in the work order." I said, "Evergreen says their report shows inspection only." Then I handed out Martina's email. That was the cleanest moment in the room. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. The email was not emotional. It was not long. It just said the vendor's records did not show a replacement or billable repair in my unit. Ruth read it twice. Alan said, "That may not include our administrative cost." I said, "I understand. Which part of the administrative cost is the replaced ruptured sprinkler head?" He blinked. I did not smile. That is another useful rule. When the document makes the point, do not decorate it. Ruth asked Denise, "Do we have the vendor invoice?" Denise said, "I would have to request it again." Ruth said, "Again?" Denise said, "I mean, I would need to pull it." Alan started typing. One of the other board members, a man named Stephen, spoke for the first time. If we do not have the vendor invoice, why was the charge entered? Denise said, the work order indicated owner responsibility. Stephen said, the work order we created? Another pause. That was the second clean cut. Because now the board was not asking me to prove I did not owe the money. They were asking Denise to prove why she had charged it. Power changes direction quietly when records appear. I said, I am requesting that the charge be removed unless the association can produce an actual vendor invoice for a billable repair, a signed authorization, and evidence that the repair occurred in my unit. Alan said, owners cannot simply demand perfect paperwork every time. That was his mistake. Ruth turned toward him slowly. For an $1,100 chargeback, yes, they can. I wrote that sentence down. Not because I needed it. Because it was beautiful in the way only practical sentences can be. The board voted to table the charge for 30 days while Denise obtained the vendor invoice and original technician report. Late fees would remain paused. The charge would not be sent to collections. That was not a full win, but it was enough. The next morning, I sent Ruth a polite recap. Thank you for hearing the dispute last night. My understanding is that the $1,143 chargeback is tabled pending production of the vendor invoice, technician report, signed authorization, and evidence of billable repair. Late fees and collection activity remain paused. Please correct me if I misunderstood. Ruth replied, that is correct. I saved it. 2 weeks passed. Denise did not produce the vendor invoice. What she produced instead was a revised explanation. She said the $1,143 had been entered based on an internal coding error. The work order for my unit had been linked to a different sprinkler repair elsewhere in the building. My account had been charged by mistake. The board would remove the balance. Internal coding error. That phrase did a lot of work. It did not explain why Denise had insisted the charge was valid. It did not explain why Alan had threatened late fees. It did not explain why the work order said owner present and authorized repair. But it did make the bill disappear. And in HOA land, disappearing a bill is sometimes the closest thing to an apology you are going to get. The portal balance went back to normal the next day. I downloaded the zero balance statement. Then I requested the meeting minutes. Denise did not like that. She wrote, the charge has been removed. This matter is closed. I wrote back, the billing matter is closed. My request for the minutes and records of the chargeback review remains open. Please provide the minutes, the corrected ledger entry, and the policy change discussed at the hearing. Ruth answered instead. We will provide the approved minutes after the next meeting. The board is also revising the chargeback process so owner accounts are not billed without vendor documentation. That was the consequence. Not Denise being fired. Not Alan apologizing. Not a dramatic confession. The consequence was better. The process changed. From that point forward, any owner chargeback over $200 required a vendor invoice, a description of work, and either owner authorization or board approval before it hit the portal. Denise could not just type a number into someone's account and dare them to fight it. I printed the revised policy and put it in the same folder as the $0 quote. The folder label was simple. Sprinkler chargeback, now supporting record. There was one more small consequence, and honestly, it may have mattered more than the refund. The next monthly board packet included a new line item under management review. Vendor chargeback control. That phrase sounded boring enough to sedate a room, which is exactly why I loved it. Before my dispute, owner chargebacks were treated like housekeeping. A manager entered them, the portal displayed them, and the owner had to fight backward from a balance that already looked official. After my hearing, the board had to look at the charge before it became a debt. That changed the order of the burden. Before, the owner had to prove the charge was wrong. After, the association had to prove the charge was ready. Alan did not like that. I know because he wrote a long comment in the board packet saying the new process could slow down cost recovery and encourage frivolous disputes. Ruth answered with one sentence in the meeting minutes. A documented charge should not be slowed by a documentation requirement. I printed that too. It was the kind of sentence that only sounds mild until you realize it has teeth. For the next 2 months, the building got quieter in a very specific way. Not peaceful. HOAs are never peaceful. But the portal stopped surprising people with random balances. A woman on the 6th floor got a plumbing charge delayed because the invoice did not identify her unit. A retired man on the 2nd floor asked for the photo attached to a balcony cleaning fee and received a correction before the fee was posted. Nobody said my name in the minutes. They did not need to. The new checklist did the talking. Vendor invoice attached. Owner notice sent. Authorization or board approval recorded. Chargeback reviewed before posting. 4 little boxes. That was all the system had needed the whole time. The funny part was that Denise started using those boxes like they had always been her idea. Her emails changed. Instead of, "The charge is valid," she started writing, "Please see attached vendor support." Instead of, "Owner responsibility," she started writing, "The board reviewed the documentation at the May meeting." It was still stiff. It was still Denise. But it was better. That is the thing about paper trail wins. They do not always give you a villain standing in a parking lot holding a cardboard box. Sometimes they give you a form that prevents the next owner from getting bullied by a number nobody checked. I was fine with that. Because my goal had never been to make Denise cry. My goal was to make the next unsupported bill harder to send. That was the main story. But HOAs rarely have only one record problem. That was what I learned from another woman in our building, and her story started with an election that looked too clean. Her name was Marisol. She lived 2 floors above me and had been in the building for 9 years. She was not loud. She was not one of those owners who turned every hallway conversation into a lawsuit. She was a nurse, she worked nights, and most of the time she wanted the building to function so she could sleep. After my sprinkler bill disappeared, Marisol emailed me because she had heard, through the very efficient rumor system known as the elevator, that I knew how to ask Denise for records. Her problem was board proxies. Every year, our HOA held an election. Owners could vote in person or submit proxy forms authorizing someone else to vote for them. Proxy voting is normal. It is also easy to abuse if nobody can see who gave authority to whom. Marisol noticed that the same 2 board members seemed to arrive at every election with a stack of proxies. Not 1 or 2. Stacks. Enough to decide close races before anyone in the room asked a question. She asked Denise for the owner list and the proxy records after the last election. Denise refused. The first reply said owner contact information was confidential. Marisol narrowed the request. She asked for the proxies themselves, with private phone numbers or emails redacted if necessary. Denise refused again. Then Marisol asked for the election sign-in sheet and vote count. Denise said the board had certified the election and no further review was required. That was not an answer. It was the same shape as my sprinkler bill. A conclusion without the records underneath it. Marisol showed me 6 months of emails. 6 months of calm requests. 6 months of Denise saying no in slightly different fonts. I asked, "Have you cited the records section of the governing documents?" She said, "I asked nicely." I said, "That is not the same thing." So we read the bylaws and the State Planned Community Records statute together. The language was not glamorous, but it was clear enough. Owners had the right to inspect certain association records for a proper purpose. Election materials and meeting records were not Denise's personal property. Marisol sent a new request. It was specific. She asked to inspect the proxy forms used in the last election, the sign-in sheet, the vote tally, the board resolution certifying the result, and the current owner roster for the purpose of verifying election procedure. She said she would accept reasonable redactions of private email addresses or phone numbers, but not the removal of owner names tied to proxy authority. She gave them 5 business days to respond. Denise replied in 47 minutes. The association does not release shareholder lists. That was funny for one reason. We were not shareholders. We were condo owners. Marisol sent one sentence back. Please identify the governing document provision that uses the term shareholder list and authorizes withholding election proxy records from unit owners. Denise did not answer. Ruth did. By then, Ruth had apparently developed a healthy fear of unsupported statements. She wrote, "The board will review the records request with counsel." That sentence changed the temperature. Marisol did something smart after that. She did not send another angry email. She sent a records log. It was a simple table. Date requested. Record requested. Management response. Governing document cited. Status. She filled in 6 months of history and attached every reply Denise had sent. The log showed a pattern. Denise could explain away one email at a time, but not all at once. March 3rd. Proxy forms. Denied. No provision cited. March 19th. Owner roster for election verification. Denied. Confidentiality cited, no section number. April 7th. Sign-in sheet and vote tally. Denied. Election certified. April 22nd. Redacted proxy copies. Denied. No authority provided. May 6th. Governing document basis for denial. No response. When Marisol sent that table to Ruth, she used one sentence in the body of the email. I am not asking the board to accept my suspicion. I am asking the board to identify the record rule it is applying. That was the right sentence. It did not accuse anyone of cheating. It did not call Denise corrupt. It forced the board to choose between producing the rule or admitting there was no rule. 2 weeks later, the board announced a records inspection procedure. Owners could request inspection appointments. Election records would be available with certain personal contact details redacted. Proxy forms would be retained for review after elections. Marisol went to the management office on a Tuesday morning after a night shift. She found 3 proxy forms signed by owners who had sold their units before the election. She found 2 proxies missing dates. She found one proxy that authorized a board member to vote for an owner who had attended the meeting in person and signed the attendance sheet. That did not automatically prove fraud. It did prove the election had not been as clean as Denise claimed. The most important form was not even one of the invalid proxies. It was a proxy from a woman named Elaine, who lived in Unit 218. Elaine had given her proxy to a board member because she was going to be out of town. But the proxy form had a strange little mark in the corner. Marisol recognized it because she had used the same downloadable form from the HOA website. The mark was a version number. Proxy form 2023-04. The election had been held in 2026. Marisol asked for the current proxy form policy. Denise said the old form was still acceptable. Marisol asked where that was written. Denise said she would have to check. There it was again. The sentence that means the policy exists only if nobody asks for it. Marisol did not need to prove every proxy was fake. She only needed to show that the board had been counting votes under a process it could not explain. Old forms, missing dates, sold units, duplicate attendance, no consistent verification. The problem was not one bad signature. The problem was a system that treated a stack of papers as valid because the right person carried it into the room. That is not governance. That is trust with a letterhead. Marisol did not accuse anyone in the lobby. She made copies, requested a written explanation, and asked the board to review whether the proxy votes had been valid. The board did not overturn the entire election. That would have been a bigger fight. But they did invalidate several proxies for future counting rules, adopted a new proxy verification procedure, and required that proxy forms be available for owner inspection after certification. The two board members who always arrived with stacks of proxies suddenly arrived with fewer. Nobody announced why. They did not have to. The records had done enough. The next election was the first one I attended in person. Not because I suddenly loved HOA meetings. I still did not. But I wanted to see what a system looks like after it has been forced to remember itself. There was a sign-in table at the door. There was a proxy intake sheet. Each proxy got logged with the owner's name, the proxy holder's name, the date, and whether the owner was already present. The secretary checked the forms against the roster before the meeting started. When someone arrived with a small stack of proxies, Ruth asked them to wait while the forms were reviewed. No drama. No speech. Just process. One proxy was rejected because the unit had changed ownership. Another was set aside because the date was missing. A third was rejected because the owner walked in 10 minutes later and voted for herself. The room did not explode. The association did not collapse. The election still happened. It just happened with records attached. That was all Marisol had wanted. Not control. Not revenge. Verification. That is the part HOA boards forget. They are not powerful because they sound official. They are powerful only as long as the documents hold. A bill needs an invoice behind it. A repair needs a work order behind it. A chargeback needs authority behind it. A proxy vote needs a real owner behind it. And when the records are missing, the letterhead starts looking very small. I never got an apology for the sprinkler bill. Marisol never got an apology for 6 months of being told records were none of her business. Denise kept her job, at least for a while. Alan stopped answering owner emails directly, which I considered a public service. The building did not become perfect. No HOA does. But something changed after that spring. Owners started asking for documents earlier. Board members started saying, "Do we have the invoice?" before approving chargebacks. The word proxy became less casual. The phrase owner responsibility stopped being used like a magic spell. As for me, I still have the folder. The first page is the $0 quote. The second page is the $1,143 bill. The third page is the vendor email saying inspection only. The last page is the revised chargeback policy. 4 pages. One little audit trail. That was all it took. The bill disappeared when the records were asked to stand behind it.